"One kiss, nothing more," the towering widow declared to the dusty crowd. But when she pulled down toward the lonely rancher's upturned face, both froze as their lips met in the fading light. The town had always whispered that the giant woman was cursed, too tall, too strange, destined to die alone on her failing ranch. They barely noticed the small, weathered rancher who watched her from the shadows, invisible to all but somehow seeing everything. Now, with 30 days before the bank claims both their lands, this desperate business arrangement between two outcasts might be their only salvation. But the kiss that was meant to seal a simple deal has awakened something neither expected, something that could either save them both or destroy their last chance at survival. Will this moment of unexpected connection become their redemption, or will it expose them to even greater ruin? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The wooden steps of Clearwater Ridge's general store groaned under Magnolia Cross's boots. At 6 feet 2 inches, she towered over every soul in the dusty settlement, her black skin drawing stares and whispers wherever she walked. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the drought-stricken town, matching the heat of shame that burned in her chest. Inside Morrison's bank, she had just endured another humiliation. The manager had barely glanced at her carefully prepared loan documents before sliding them back across his desk. His words still echoed in her ears about women and their place, about failed ventures and risky investments. 30 days until foreclosure. The number hammered in her mind like a death sentence. 2 years of widowhood had not softened the town's judgment. If anything, the whispers had grown crueler. The giant woman who killed her husband with her strangeness. The unnatural creature no decent man would touch. 3 failed courtships had sealed her reputation as cursed, each suitor fleeing after a single awkward encounter. Her late husband's voice haunted her still. Harold Cross had taken every opportunity to remind her of her place, calling her his mistake, his burden. In public, he had laughed about needing a ladder to kiss his wife. In private, his cruelty had cut deeper than any physical blow. The ranch that had been her prison during marriage now faced destruction. Without Harold's name on the deed, the bank questioned every decision she made. The drought had withered her cattle and crops, leaving her with land too dry to sustain life and too remote to sell. Across the street, Samuel Fletcher emerged from the hardware store, his slight frame nearly invisible among the crowd. At 41, Sam stood barely 5 feet 6 inches, his weathered face unremarkable to most eyes. The townspeople looked through him as if he were made of prairie dust. But Sam noticed everything. He had watched Magnolia for 3 years, observing her gentle way with injured animals, her quiet dignity in the face of public scorn. While others saw a giant to be feared, he saw strength tempered by kindness, intelligence masked by grief. His own ranch told a story of quiet failure, 40 acres of stubborn earth that refused to yield enough to matter. Without access to the creek that ran through Magnolia's property, his cattle grew thin and his hopes thinner. The bank had delivered the same ultimatum to him that morning: 30 days to pay or lose everything. Sam had no family to mourn his failure, no legacy to preserve. He had accepted long ago that some men were meant to live and die unnoticed, but watching Magnolia fight for her survival stirred something in him he thought had died with his dreams. That evening, as purple shadows stretched across the settlement, an idea took shape in Magnolia's desperate mind. She remembered fragments of conversation from the bank, legal terms that might offer salvation. Married couples could consolidate land claims. Extended payment terms existed for established families. The law favored partnerships over individual ownership. The solution struck her with the force of lightning: marriage, not for love or companionship, but for survival, a business arrangement that could save them both. She found Sam at the livery stable, tending to his aging mare with the same careful attention he gave everything in his quiet life. The words came out in a rush, practical and direct. His land connected to hers. Her water rights could save his cattle. Together they might convince the bank to extend their deadline. Sam listened without interruption, his weathered hands never pausing in their work. When she finished, he met her eyes with surprising steadiness. The proposal made sense, more sense than anything either of them had hoped for in years. They agreed to meet in the town square the following evening. Engagements in Clearwater Ridge required public announcement, a tradition that would serve their purposes. The community would witness their arrangement, making it official and binding. As the appointed hour arrived, curious townspeople gathered around the square's weathered gazebo. Magnolia stood tall despite the weight of their stares, her voice carrying across the evening air as she announced their intention to marry. The crowd stirred with surprise and barely concealed amusement. To seal their agreement, she suggested a ceremonial kiss. Business partners shaking hands. Nothing more complicated than that. Sam nodded his understanding, his face revealing nothing of the storm building in his chest. Magnolia leaned down, her height requiring her to bend low to reach him. Sam tilted his face upward, expecting a brief, formal gesture. Their lips met in the golden light of sunset, witnessed by half the town. Neither had prepared for the shock of connection that passed between them. The kiss lasted only seconds, but time seemed to stretch and bend around them. Sam's eyes remained open, drinking in the sight of her face so close to his. Magnolia felt something she had never experienced, the sensation of being truly seen. When they separated, both stood frozen, the carefully constructed walls around their hearts showing dangerous cracks. The crowd began to disperse, satisfied with their entertainment, unaware that something profound had shifted in the space between two desperate souls. The business arrangement they had crafted with such practical precision suddenly felt like the beginning of something neither had dared to hope for, something that could save them both, or destroy their last chance at survival. The kiss lingered in both their minds through a sleepless night. Sam stared at his cabin ceiling, replaying the moment when Magnolia's eyes had widened with surprise. She paced her empty house, touching her lips and wondering what had possessed her to feel such unexpected warmth. They met the next morning at the property line between their ranches. The conversation started awkwardly, both dancing around what had happened in the town square. Sam spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. The words came slowly at first. He admitted to watching her from a distance, seeing how she gentled frightened horses with patience, how she shared her meager grain with wild rabbits during the worst of the drought, how she carried herself with dignity even when the townspeople whispered cruel jokes. Magnolia stared at him in wonder. No one had ever noticed such things about her. Harold had seen only her height, her difference, her failure to be the small, delicate wife he had imagined. The town saw a curiosity, a woman too large for their narrow definitions of femininity. She found herself sharing memories she had buried deep. The loneliness of her marriage, where affection had been rationed like water during drought. Harold's habit of closing his eyes whenever he kissed her, as if the sight of her face caused him pain. The way he introduced her to strangers as his burden, his mistake. Sam listened without judgment, his steady presence encouraging her to continue. She spoke of feeling monstrous, of believing she was too much for any man to handle. The failed courtships had reinforced Harold's cruel assessment. She was unnatural, unmarriageable, destined for isolation. When she finished, Sam shared his own story of invisibility, how people looked through him as if he were made of air, how shopkeepers served him last, if they remembered him at all, how he had taught himself to read by candlelight, devouring books because fictional characters were more real to him than the neighbors who forgot his name. His education had come from dusty volumes left behind by the previous ranch owner. Philosophy, literature, mathematics, astronomy. Knowledge that meant nothing in a world that valued only what could be seen and measured. But those books had kept his mind alive during years of profound loneliness. They discovered shared dreams that surprised them both. Magnolia had always wanted to expand her ranch, to breed horses instead of just cattle. Sam dreamed of building something lasting, of leaving a mark on the world that proved he had existed. Neither had dared voice these ambitions to another soul. As they talked, something shifted between them. The business arrangement began to feel like possibility, not just survival, but the chance to build something neither could create alone, partnership in the truest sense. But their growing connection did not go unnoticed. Martha Caldwell made it her mission to document their every interaction. She positioned herself strategically around town, gathering intelligence like a general preparing for war. The speed of their courtship struck her as suspicious. Her observations spread through Clearwater Ridge like wildfire. The mismatched couple spent hours talking by the creek. They worked together to repair fence lines, their different heights creating an almost comical sight. Magnolia had to crouch while Sam stretched to meet in the middle. The town's amusement grew darker as days passed. Bets were placed on how long Sam would last before fleeing like Magnolia's previous suitors. Some wagered he would abandon her within a week. Others gave him a month before the novelty wore thin. Judge Cornelius Hartwell watched their courtship with particular interest. His position as the town's primary authority gave his opinions considerable weight. He had known Harold Cross personally and remembered the man's complaints about his oversized wife. The judge found it difficult to believe that any marriage involving Magnolia could be genuine. Hartwell's skepticism crystallized into active opposition when Sam and Magnolia requested a wedding date. The judge studied their application with exaggerated care, searching for legal grounds to deny their request. Their haste struck him as evidence of fraud. He began asking pointed questions around town. Had anyone witnessed genuine affection between them? Were they living separately as proper unmarried people should? What financial arrangements had they discussed? His inquiries planted seeds of doubt in minds already predisposed to suspicion. The pressure mounted when Hartwell summoned them both to his office. He sat behind his imposing desk like a king holding court, his pale eyes moving between them with undisguised disdain. His questions came rapid fire, designed to expose inconsistencies in their story. Why the sudden engagement after years of barely speaking? What did Sam gain from marrying a woman the entire town considered unmarriageable? How could Magnolia claim to love a man she had ignored for 3 years? Each question felt like an accusation. Sam and Magnolia left the judge's office shaken but more united than before. Hartwell's hostility had crystallized their resolve. They were no longer just business partners seeking convenience. They were allies against a world determined to keep them separate and defeated. That evening, they sat by Magnolia's kitchen table, planning their defense against growing opposition. The kiss that had started as ceremony now felt like a promise neither fully understood. They were stepping into unknown territory, guided only by hope and the certainty that together they were stronger than apart. The town waited for their inevitable failure, but Sam and Magnolia had begun to believe in something more dangerous than success. They had begun to believe in each other. Judge Hartwell's announcement hit the town like a thunderclap. He would not perform the marriage ceremony. His declaration from the courthouse steps drew a crowd of curious onlookers, all eager to witness the spectacle of the giant woman's latest rejection. The judge's reasoning sounded official and proper. Fraudulent unions designed to circumvent banking regulations violated both civil and moral law. He had a duty to protect the integrity of marriage as a sacred institution. No ceremony would take place under his authority. Magnolia heard the news from Martha Caldwell, who delivered it with barely concealed satisfaction. The words struck like physical blows, each one confirming her deepest fears. She was too much, too strange, too cursed for even a business arrangement to succeed. She found Sam at his barn, mucking stalls with methodical precision. The news had reached him already. His shoulders carried the weight of disappointment, but his eyes held something else: determination. That night, Magnolia made a decision that felt like mercy. She walked to Sam's cabin through moonlight that turned the prairie silver. Her words came out stilted and formal, a prepared speech designed to set him free. He deserved better than association with a woman the town considered a joke. Marriage to her would bring only ridicule and isolation. He could find someone normal, someone who would not tower over him like a monument to his poor judgment. She released him from their agreement with all the dignity she could manage. Sam listened in silence until she finished. Then he spoke with quiet intensity that surprised them both. He would not be dismissed like her previous suitors. This was not Harold Cross speaking through shame and social pressure. This was his choice, and he chose her. His words carried weight because they came without desperation. He had lived 41 years as an invisible man. He understood what it meant to be overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. But he also knew the difference between being alone and being lonely. With her, the loneliness had begun to lift. Sam revealed something he had never told another soul. His small stature and quiet nature had taught him to observe rather than participate. He had learned to read people like weather patterns, seeing storms before they struck, recognizing truth beneath surface appearances. He had watched Magnolia for years, noting details that escaped everyone else. How she positioned herself to shield smaller people from harsh wind, how she rationed her own food to feed stray animals, how she never spoke ill of Harold despite his public cruelties. These observations had built into respect, then admiration, then something deeper. Their argument continued past midnight, her self-doubt battling his certainty. She listed every cruel comment the town had made about their pairing. He countered with evidence of their growing partnership, their complementary strengths, their shared vision for the future. By dawn, they had reached a new understanding. This was no longer about avoiding foreclosure or satisfying banking requirements. This had become about proving something to themselves, and to a world that had written them both off as failures. They would demonstrate their partnership publicly. Not through grand gestures or romantic displays, but through competence and collaboration. If Judge Hartwell required proof of genuine connection, they would provide evidence impossible to dismiss. The first test came immediately. Both ranches faced water shortages that threatened their remaining livestock. Working separately, each would lose animals they could not afford to sacrifice. Working together, they could maximize their combined resources. Sam's knowledge of animal behavior proved invaluable. Years of quiet observation had taught him to read cattle moods and predict their movements. He could spot illness days before symptoms became obvious to others. His small hands allowed him to perform veterinary procedures that would challenge larger men. Magnolia's physical strength complemented his expertise perfectly. She could handle the heavy work of moving equipment and managing difficult animals. Her height gave her perspectives that revealed problems invisible from ground level. Together, they accomplished more in days than either had managed in months alone. The town watched their collaboration with grudging interest. Even the most skeptical observers could not deny their effectiveness. Cattle that had been dying under separate management began to thrive under their combined care. Fences were repaired, wells were cleared, and both properties showed signs of revival. But Judge Hartwell remained unmoved by their success. If anything, their competence seemed to increase his suspicion. He began suggesting that their partnership proved his point about fraudulent motivations. They were business associates, not romantic partners. His opposition hardened into active interference. He questioned their living arrangements, demanding proof they maintained proper separation. He investigated their financial dealings, searching for evidence of illegal collaboration. He made it clear that no amount of success would change his decision. The pressure from official disapproval emboldened the town's worst voices. Martha Caldwell organized other women in whispered campaigns against the unnatural pairing. Men placed new bets on when Sam would come to his senses and abandon his giant bride. Some townspeople began to shift their opinions, impressed by the couple's obvious competence and growing prosperity, but their quiet support meant little against the judge's vocal opposition and the gossip's relentless campaign. Sam and Magnolia found themselves fighting battles on multiple fronts. They had to save their ranches, prove their relationship's legitimacy, and resist a community determined to see them fail. The kiss that had awakened unexpected possibilities now felt like the beginning of a war they might not win. Yet something had changed between them that could not be undone. They had tasted partnership, respect, and the possibility of being truly known by another person. Win or lose, they would face the future together. Magnolia strode into Morrison's bank 3 days later, armed with ledgers and determination. She had spent sleepless nights preparing, calculating figures that would have impressed a university professor. Her presentation to the bank manager was precise, methodical, and devastating in its clarity. She had identified cost-cutting measures that could reduce their debt by 30%, water management techniques that would triple their land's productivity, market strategies that would double their cattle prices within 2 seasons. The numbers were irrefutable. The manager studied her work with grudging respect. Harold Cross had never allowed his wife to handle business matters, considering her too simple for such complexities. The woman sitting across from him now displayed financial acumen that rivaled seasoned businessmen. During her marriage, Magnolia had been forbidden from participating in ranch decisions. But she had listened from kitchen doorways, absorbed every conversation about markets and mortgages. Harold's dismissal of her intelligence had been his greatest miscalculation. She negotiated with the calm authority of someone who finally understood her own worth. The bank agreed to extend their deadline by 60 days, impressed by her comprehensive restructuring plan. For the first time in years, foreclosure seemed less like certainty and more like a problem that could be solved. Sam's contributions proved equally vital, though less visible. His intimate knowledge of animal behavior had taught him techniques that transformed their livestock operations. He could predict weather patterns by watching cattle movements, spot disease before veterinarians, and maximize breeding outcomes through careful observation. His small stature, long considered a disadvantage, became an asset in close work with horses. Skittish animals that shied away from larger handlers accepted his gentle presence. He could slip beneath cattle to treat injuries, work in tight spaces, and handle tasks that would challenge men twice his size. The secret to Sam's expertise lay in 20 years of desperate learning. After losing his family to fever, he had taught himself everything necessary for survival: veterinary medicine from borrowed textbooks, animal psychology through patient observation, financial management through bitter necessity. Every skill had been earned through solitude and determination. While other men learned trades through apprenticeships and family connections, Sam had educated himself by candlelight, driven by the knowledge that failure meant starvation. Their combined efforts began producing results impossible to ignore. Cattle that had been dying under separate management flourished under their unified approach. Pastures that had seemed exhausted showed signs of recovery. Equipment that had sat broken for years returned to productive service. Word of their success spread beyond Clearwater Ridge. Neighboring ranchers began seeking their advice, particularly interested in Sam's innovative animal care techniques. His reputation as an expert grew quietly but steadily, built on results rather than self-promotion. Magnolia's business strategies attracted attention from merchants and suppliers. Her ability to negotiate favorable terms and manage complex transactions challenged assumptions about both her intelligence and her gender. Orders that had been declined under Harold's management were now eagerly accepted. The town watched their transformation with mixed emotions. Some residents began to question their previous judgments. Impressed by prosperity that benefited the entire community, the couple's success brought business to local merchants and employment opportunities for struggling families. Martha Caldwell found herself torn between old prejudices and new evidence. Her position as the town's primary gossip required her to acknowledge what everyone could see. The mismatched couple had achieved something remarkable, regardless of their unconventional partnership. Younger townspeople, less invested in maintaining social hierarchies, openly admired the couple's achievements. They saw innovation where their elders saw impropriety, partnership where others saw peculiarity. A generational divide began forming around the couple's reputation. But Judge Hartwell's opposition only intensified as their success grew. He interpreted their prosperity as evidence of his fraud theories rather than proof of genuine partnership. Public meetings featured his warnings about legal consequences and moral decay. Sam began noticing details that troubled him. The judge's meetings with strangers who asked pointed questions about land values and railroad access, conversations that ended abruptly when others approached, financial documents glimpsed and quickly hidden during courthouse visits. His lifetime of observation had taught him to recognize patterns others missed. The same instincts that helped him read animal behavior now detected human deceptions. Something larger than moral objection was driving Hartwell's relentless opposition. Late-night rides past the judge's home revealed meetings that seemed oddly secretive for legitimate business. Well-dressed men from distant cities who arrived without fanfare and departed before dawn. Maps spread across tables pointing to properties throughout the county. Sam shared his observations with Magnolia, who added her own suspicious details. Bank officials asking unusual questions about mineral rights and railroad easements. Pressure to sell quickly rather than refinance. Interest from buyers who had never seen the properties they wished to purchase. The pieces began forming a pattern neither had expected. Their personal struggle for acceptance and survival might be connected to something much larger. Forces beyond small-town prejudice could be working to separate them from their land. Their growing awareness brought new urgency to their partnership. Success in saving their ranches had given them confidence and credibility. Now they faced the possibility that their achievements might have made them targets for more sophisticated enemies. The business arrangement that had begun as desperate survival had evolved into genuine partnership. The couple who had started as outcasts seeking acceptance now stood as threats to plans they were only beginning to understand. Their next challenge would test not just their relationship, but their ability to protect everything they had built together. Martha Caldwell had spent 30 years perfecting the art of strategic eavesdropping. Her position at the post office provided countless opportunities to observe the town's private business. But the conversation she overheard outside Judge Hartwell's office would haunt her for the rest of her life. Two well-dressed strangers spoke in hushed tones with the judge, their words carrying across the evening air. Railroad development required specific parcels of land. Properties had to be acquired quickly and cheaply before word spread about the planned route. Foreclosures provided the most efficient method of obtaining clear titles. Martha pressed herself against the building's shadow, her heart pounding with the magnitude of what she was hearing. Judge Hartwell was not protecting the town's moral standards. He was orchestrating its economic destruction for personal profit. The strangers discussed their partnership with clinical precision. Hartwell would manipulate legal proceedings to force foreclosures. They would purchase the properties through intermediaries at fraction of their true value. When the railroad announcement came, the land would be worth 10 times what they paid. Multiple families throughout the county faced similar manipulation. The Hendersons had lost their farm the previous month under suspicious circumstances. The Miller Ranch had been foreclosed despite payments that should have satisfied their debt. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. Sam's meticulous documentation suddenly took on new significance. His habit of recording unusual events had captured evidence of Hartwell's deception. Dates, times, participants in secret meetings, financial irregularities in courthouse records, pressure tactics used against vulnerable landowners. 20 years of careful observation had trained Sam to notice what others missed. His detailed notes revealed the scope of the conspiracy with devastating clarity. The quiet man who had been invisible to his neighbors possessed evidence that could destroy the judge's carefully constructed scheme. Martha faced a crisis of conscience that shattered her comfortable worldview. She had spent years spreading gossip about Sam and Magnolia, dismissing them as curiosities unworthy of respect. Now she discovered they were victims of a conspiracy that threatened the entire community. Her transformation began immediately. The woman who had been their harshest critic became their most valuable ally. She used her network of gossips and busybodies to spread the truth as quickly as she had once spread lies. The revelation moved through town like wildfire. The community's reaction was swift and decisive. Families who had lost their properties suddenly understood they had been cheated rather than defeated by circumstances. Neighbors who had blamed themselves for financial failures realized they had been systematically robbed. Sam and Magnolia found themselves at the center of a growing movement for justice. Their personal struggle had uncovered corruption that affected dozens of families. The couple who had been outcasts seeking acceptance became leaders of a community demanding accountability. Magnolia's business acumen proved crucial in organizing the town's response. She coordinated meetings, analyzed legal documents, and developed strategies for exposing the conspiracy. Her height, once a source of shame, now commanded attention as she addressed increasingly large gatherings. Her voice carried across crowded rooms with authority that could not be ignored. The woman who had been dismissed as unmarriageable now spoke for families fighting to save their homes. Her intelligence, previously hidden behind shame and self-doubt, blazed forth with fierce clarity. Sam's evidence provided the foundation for their case. His careful documentation offered proof that legal processes had been corrupted. His observations of secret meetings revealed the conspiracy's scope. His quiet diligence had created an unassailable record of systematic fraud. The partnership between Sam and Magnolia deepened as they worked to save their community. Their complementary strengths created something more powerful than either could achieve alone. Business arrangement had evolved into genuine partnership, then into leadership that transformed both them and their neighbors. Judge Hartwell's position became increasingly precarious as evidence mounted against him. His attempts to dismiss the accusations only drew more attention to his suspicious behavior. Town meetings grew larger and more hostile as families demanded answers. The judge's desperation led to increasingly obvious mistakes. He pressured witnesses to remain silent, threatened accusers with legal consequences, and attempted to destroy courthouse records. Each action only strengthened the case against him. Martha's network of informants tracked his every move. Women who had been ignored as mere gossips now served as intelligence gatherers in a battle for their community's survival. Their intimate knowledge of local affairs made them formidable opponents. The railroad consortium's involvement became impossible to hide as their local agents panicked. Attempts to accelerate remaining foreclosures drew attention to properties that had not yet been targeted. The conspiracy's scope expanded far beyond anyone's initial suspicions. Sam's reputation transformed overnight from invisible nobody to essential witness. His testimony would determine whether justice prevailed or corruption triumphed. The man who had spent 41 years being overlooked now held his community's future in his hands. Magnolia stood beside him as they prepared for the final confrontation. The woman the town had considered cursed now represented their best hope for salvation. Her strength, intelligence, and determination had become weapons against those who would destroy their way of life. The business marriage that had begun as desperate survival had evolved into something neither had imagined. They were no longer fighting just for their ranches, but for the soul of their community. The kiss that had awakened unexpected feelings now symbolized resistance against corruption and injustice. Their love had grown through shared purpose and mutual respect. Now it would be tested in a battle that would determine not just their future, but the fate of everyone they had learned to call neighbors and friends. The town hall had never held so many people. Every seat was occupied, with families standing along the walls and spilling onto the front steps. The air crackled with tension as Judge Hartwell faced his accusers for the final time. Magnolia rose from her seat in the front row, her commanding height drawing every eye in the room. The woman who had once cowered beneath public scrutiny now stood as the community's voice. Her words carried across the packed hall with unwavering authority. She presented the evidence methodically, building her case like a seasoned prosecutor. Sam's documented observations provided the framework. Martha's testimony filled in crucial details. Bank records revealed financial irregularities that could not be explained away. The railroad consortium's involvement became undeniable as Magnolia read from intercepted correspondence. Land purchases at artificially low prices, coordinated foreclosure schedules, profit projections that depended on community devastation. The scope of the conspiracy shocked even those who had suspected corruption. Judge Hartwell's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. His attempts to discredit witnesses only highlighted his desperation. Each objection revealed more about his knowledge of details he should not have possessed. His authority dissolved before the community's collective outrage. Sam's testimony delivered the final blow. His quiet voice carried absolute credibility as he recounted conversations, meetings, and transactions he had witnessed. 20 years of careful observation had prepared him for this moment when his words could save an entire community. The judge's removal from office came by unanimous vote. His business partners fled before warrants could be issued. Properties obtained through fraud would be returned to their rightful owners. The railroad development would proceed fairly, benefiting the community rather than exploiting it. In the aftermath of victory, the town's attention turned to celebration. The couple who had been outcasts just weeks before now stood as heroes who had saved their neighbors' homes and livelihoods. Their transformation from pariahs to champions seemed almost miraculous. Martha Caldwell approached Magnolia with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Her apology carried the weight of years of cruel gossip and social exclusion. She had spent so much time looking for scandal that she had missed the genuine worth standing before her eyes. The wedding preparations began immediately, organized by the same women who had once whispered cruel jokes. They decorated the town square with wildflowers gathered from rescued ranches. Children practiced songs celebrating the couple who had become their heroes. Judge Hartwell's replacement arrived from the county seat, eager to perform his first ceremony in Clearwater Ridge. He had heard the story of corruption exposed and justice served. The couple standing before him represented everything good about frontier communities protecting their own. The ceremony took place at sunset, with golden light painting the assembled crowd. Magnolia wore her mother's dress, altered to fit her impressive frame. Sam wore his finest suit, cleaned and pressed for the most important day of his life. Neither had ever imagined being the center of such positive attention. When they exchanged vows, their words carried deeper meaning than traditional promises. They had tested their partnership under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. They had chosen each other not just once, but repeatedly through doubt, opposition, and danger. The kiss that sealed their marriage was nothing like the desperate business arrangement that had started their journey. This was celebration, promise, and triumph combined into a moment that belonged entirely to them. The crowd's cheers acknowledged not just their union, but their victory over forces that had threatened everyone present. The reception continued long into the night, with families whose homes had been saved joining in gratitude and celebration. The couple danced awkwardly, her height requiring him to stand on a wooden crate, but their joy transformed comedy into beauty. Love had made them graceful despite their physical differences. 6 months later, their combined ranch had become the most prosperous in the territory. Magnolia's business strategies and Sam's animal expertise created success that exceeded their most optimistic projections. They had proven that partnership could accomplish what individual effort could not. They had also taken in 2 orphaned children, siblings whose parents had died in an influenza outbreak. The boy and girl who had known only institutional care found themselves in a home built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They thrived under attention from parents who understood what it meant to be overlooked and dismissed. Martha Caldwell became their closest friend and most ardent supporter. The woman who had once spread malicious gossip now defended them against any criticism with fierce loyalty. Her network of informants had been transformed into a support system that protected the unusual family. The railroad development proceeded as planned, but under community oversight that ensured fair treatment for all landowners. Property values increased throughout the county, benefiting families who had nearly lost everything to corruption. Progress came without the exploitation that had been originally intended. On a morning bright with promise, Sam and Magnolia sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. The sunrise painted their flourishing ranch in golden light, symbolizing the hope they had built from desperation. Their love had grown from business arrangement to genuine partnership to something that had saved an entire community. The kiss that had begun as nothing more than a formality had become the foundation of a life neither had dared to imagine. They had found not just survival, but triumph. Not just acceptance, but leadership. Not just partnership, but love that had transformed everyone it touched.